So good afternoon, everybody. I would like to, first of all, thank you all for your presence. I'm António Buscardini. I will have the pleasure to moderate today's discussion. Towards a new way after COVID-19 is the topic that brought us together. The New Way is indeed the title of the last book of our main speaker, Jaime Quesado. For those who still don't know him, Jaime is a Portuguese economist, a well-known opinion maker. He signs several political opinion pieces on multiple Portuguese newspapers. And here in Brussels, where I'm speaking from, he signs in a pan-European media named New Europe, a weekly piece. Early this year, he released a book, The New Way, A Competence Agenda for a Trust Society, a book that intended to foresee the next decade. But surprise, surprise, COVID-19 appeared. And without any question, this topic is still relevant, the new way. Jaime, in your book, one of the first lines tricked me. You were talking about the VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Jaime, you have the floor now.
Okay. And first of all, thank you very much for the presence of most friends, most from Brussels, most from Portugal, and a special word to António that has been doing very special work preparing this seminar, also to Henrique and to Mário Campolargo that are going to make some brief outlines on the book, and then we have an open discussion with all the components. Well, I decided to write this manifesto last year because I think that we are living now a very, very interesting time. I have been participating since the last 20 years in lots of projects in government, also private sector, concerning innovation, competitiveness, and technology. And I think that within this crisis provocated by the pandemic, we are having a time where we have the need to rethink what we are by individuals and by community. The message of my manifesto, and most of the people that are taking this book has already received it, is very simple. I think that we are living a time where it matters to be competent. So I put the emphasis on the question of the competence agenda. The crisis that we are facing is also a challenge to the governments, to the universities, mostly to the companies also, in terms of trying to be the best in terms of the solutions they provide to the needs that people and society as a whole are having. And also, and Enrico was a colleague of mine 25 years ago in a very interesting post-graduation in political science in the Catholic University in Lisbon. And we spoke at the time and also now about trust. I think we are living a lot the question of trust. Citizens, institutions, I think society as a whole are living a challenge of trust. And we will not have trust if we are not competent. This is a message that I have. Of course, I put in this manifesto some examples that I think that are very interesting in what happened in Portugal during the last 20 years. I think the story of Portugal in the last 20 years is a combination of two sides. First of all, we have a lot of entrepreneurship and innovation. We have a very interesting side of the society that tries to be very innovative in terms of the solutions and the propositions it makes. And we have lots of examples in terms of companies, in terms of the projects. I cite some of them in my book, but we have lots of them. At the same time, I think we have a role to do in the future in terms of trying to reorganize in a better way the organization we have. I think one of the challenges we have in our country, and this crisis will be definitely a challenge for that, is that we must be better in terms of organization. We have lots of rankings from universities like IMD in Switzerland, like London Business School, and others that think that in Portugal we have a lack of management and organization. I think we have an opportunity to be better on that. We have the resource, we have the competence, we have the experience, and I think that when I speak about the new way, it's about that. A new way in better, we have be better and things like that. Thank you very much again for this opportunity. And now I think we have the floor for the participants to say their ideas and to share what we can say it's better for this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. You spoke about, well, the fact that the world is in a standstill, that we need to reshape the world. Notion that is key is trust. So in the first topic that we try to structure, we try to foresee the world of tomorrow and to link it precisely with trust. Edward Fishman, respectful American opinion maker, said that recently that the world order is dead. So that this pandemic will provoke a fast and speed change in the balance of powers. So we are talking about, of course, United States and China, and in the middle, the EU. And knowing that Henrique is an expert in this field because of his project, his Eupportunity, which is a European affairs consulting firm. Henrique, what do you think about the future world order? Is it really that? Will we have a new order?
Wow, that's quite a question. First of all, let me confirm that you can hear me and see me well, or should I turn off the video? It's working now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, and you can see the video as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know what will the world order will be, but I think it was Ricardo Borges Castro, Portuguese, who used to work in the Commission in the foresight of the European Commission, who coined a phrase recently, something like pan accelerator. I think that was the word he coined, meaning that what we've been saying, a lot of people have been saying that the pandemic has actually accelerated tendencies that we could actually see coming, but it has accelerated. And I would say that one of those is the change in the world order. And there are a few tendencies that we can see. One is the US started looking to the Pacific rather than the Atlantic long ago. That was even before this presidency, during the Obama presidency. But this happened while, I would say, the US was still in transit, in the sense that it hadn't left Europe yet. It had already left Europe, it hadn't reached the Pacific yet. So I think somehow this is, and that is a major change. This is the first crisis since World War II where the US is absolutely irrelevant as a world power. This is the first time this happens. And we're still very soon, it's still very soon to understand what's the outcome of this, but it's clearly a change. Is this something that is a new trend and this will remain like that? Or it's just a situation and the new presidency will change that? I'm not sure. What I know is this is the first time this happened. We didn't look to the US for guidance. We didn't look to the US for help. And that is a major change. Now, that's different from thinking that the US is no longer the big ally as it was, or that we're no longer part of the West, which we are still. So I think that two things remain: the West, the idea of West, and the alliance with the US. But the role of the US in the world has drastically changed. It's not only the fact that we dislike, or most of us dislike, the Trump presidency, but it's the fact that this has changed. Now, on the other hand, there has been another change, which is still hard to read, I think, but it's the role of China. It was obvious for many years now, for a few years now, that China was rising as an economical power. And for a while, there wasn't a conflictuous relation with China. And awkwardly, and I say awkwardly because I think that the Chinese diplomacy chose an awkward path. During this pandemic, initially there was an approach. Honestly, I think that when the pandemic arrived in Europe, if I can put it that way, we understood the images we had seen from Wuhan, and we could see ourselves in those images. So there was even a more closer relation than usually. But then the attitude that the Chinese authorities took since then, which has been quite aggressive and very pushy, and what has been called a very strong diplomacy, has pushed backwards this relation. And currently what you see is not only at government level, but at the individual's level, a resistance towards China, and this changes. And now, I'll try to stop here to be brief. I don't think that we can use the framework or the mindset of the Cold War to think about the relations with China. And the reason is, not only a lot of things are very different, but we never had an economic engagement with the other side, meaning Soviet Union and the countries that were aligned with the Soviet Union, as we have with China. So using the framework or the mindset of the Cold War it's not helpful. But we need to think of some way how we will engage with China, understanding that clearly the differences that we have are stronger than eventually we thought. And that showed recently. And on the other hand, we are more distant from the US, but we are still in the West. So I think the challenging possibility is that eventually, and I know I'm going a little bit too far saying this, but I want to be provocative. Eventually, the lead of the West needs to come to Europe. That would be quite surprising because we're not able to organize ourselves when it comes to our role in the world or where do we stand. But eventually, the leader of the free world would have to be the EU, since the US is not willing to do that. And I know this is risky to put this possibility, but I think it's interesting.
You said twice that we are still the West, that we are part of the same bloc. But clearly there is a lack of trust between the two parties. Some argue that it's more related to the presidency and it's a momentum that can indeed change in the future. But the fact that there is this friction and it causes divisions, it causes also institutional problems within worldwide organizations. At the same time, we saw as well other blocs, and namely China, trying to be present, to have an active diplomacy, as you said. Now, don't you see that there is the danger that the role of the United States will permanently change, that the damage that is being provoked by this presidency will indeed change the course of things?
I think there is that danger, but when I say the West, what I'm trying to say is, if you look at China and US as competing powers, we may be distancing from the US in our relation, but we're not distancing from the Western ideas or the Western civilization. And that's what I'm saying. So there is no chance for me, as far as I read, and actually as I would hope, we're not moving away from the values of the Western society, of the Western world. What's happening now is that the country that had the lead in the Western world is not willing to lead because it's not willing to engage with the other members of this community. And it's actually there's, well, I'm not going to say aggressive, but there's the same kind of acrimony with its supposed allies as with its foes. So the relation that the President of the United States, and now going to your question, the President of the United States has with the leader of China, the leader of Russia, or the leader of the EU, or the leader of Germany, it seems almost the same. I mean, he doesn't engage as if he was engaging with his allies. So that's a major change. Is this a change, momentum? A new presidency would resolve these? I think that partially yes, eventually, but partially not, because of two things. One, the trend to look to the Pacific came before Trump, so that's going to remain probably, whatever the president is there, and so that I think it's to remain there. Secondly, and I think that's a problem that exists in the US, and we can look at it because there are signs of it in Europe as well. There is no longer, and I think that will take us on another conversation, but the fact is, during the 80s and the 90s, or up until the 80s and the 90s, we knew who we were and the values we had, because they were different from the ones on the other side. So it was either this model or the alternative model. So with all the problems that it had, we knew this was our way of life that we preferred. Now, since you don't present another alternative, and China is not presented as an alternative model, we're more, there's a lack of allegiance to our own model. That's my point. And that's where I think we need to remember that we are the West, we are the Western world, we believe in these values, and there is a lot of people in the US that also believe in these. Is it possible that we need to take the lead? I don't know if we're capable. I think that's very hard and very unlikely, but eventually that's necessary.
Jaime, Henrique was saying that there is hope that perhaps you will take the lead. What do you think about that? Do you think that there is a chance that you will come up of the situation as the potential block that can appear?
Yes, I think that we are facing a very interesting time in terms of what's going to happen in Europe. I wrote before this my manifesto, another manifesto that was called My Europe, and I have here two people that I think that I'd like them to speak later. That is Mário Campolargo, he's supposed to speak, and also Maria Carvalho, that had the pleasure to present my manifesto 2 years ago. But I think that Europe is facing a new challenge in terms of unity, in terms of identity, and especially in terms of trying to have new solutions for what we are facing. Of course, now the theme is the recovery plan, trying to get a solution in terms of some unity on that. But most for that, the problem is to have a strategy for the future. And in terms of that, I think that Mário Campolargo and Maria Carvalho, I think that they should give some opinion on that. Afterwards, we have other people on that. Okay, thank you.
Mario, welcome to the debate. I see that you're connected now. So I'm sure you were listening to this discussion. We were talking about, well, the future of the new world order. So do you think that this pandemic will indeed accelerate this process and that the balance of powers will change?
Thanks, Antonio. Thanks, Jaime, for the invitation, and thanks, Henrique, for your first intervention. And maybe, Antonio, rather than answering you directly, I wanted probably to complement what Henrique said, because normally when you think about the new orders that are born with very significantly important, epochal moments, wars and pandemics and things like this, we have two aspects that we need to look. Is the balance of powers, and actually Henrique addressed it very well, and he made an historical tracing of the a few past decades, and how the balance of powers between the different continents or regions has been happening. But the other aspect that normally comes with the new orders is the institutional framework. And we have seen the creation of a number of multinational or international institutions after the Second World War, laudable like they are always in the beginning. And all the institutions face one thing, that is their ability to renew themselves in face of the challenges that they are facing, or collapse because they were not being able to change at the pace that the circumstances or the external events were requiring. And I want to put a bit of focus on that one and probably come back a bit to Europe. Because in fact, what this pandemic is doing very much for ourselves is challenging us from the institutional construct. And I don't think that I need to take parties in this game. I mean, I think that we just need to see that, in some sense, what probably a few, I would say, months ago would be argued in the construction of Europe by the member states that should never be given to the European Commission, for example, is now made as a plea, please do it, because otherwise we will not succeed collectively. And this is just an example on how we need to reinvent ourselves in the context that we are. Now, the question maybe then raised is Europe up to the challenge that is facing, if not from other points of view, from an institutional point of view? And it's quite interesting, the recent developments and I would claim, the courage of the European Commission in changing, if I may say, the own resources of the European Commission and the European Union by going to the market. Now, I don't want to superemphasize this, but I want to say that this is really, really a change as compared to the past. You know, we have followed the discussions of the new MFF in February, just before the pandemics. I was very close to some of the discussions that were on what would be the percentage that every member state should contribute or not, and suddenly all this seems to be far in the past, because then the givens are completely different. I mean, I just want to say that, so apart from the balance of powers, this institutional ability to react in a positive mode can be particularly interesting. And now, António, if you allow me, and I didn't have the opportunity to discuss this with Jaime, because I basically read this book over the weekend. But I found, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, that the chapters are competence, cooperation, communication, convergence, and community. There is one thing that is common to all of these chapters, I would say all of these words, is that all of them start by co. And I think that this is quite interesting in this context, because when we cooperate, when we co-work, when we see co-institutionalized, then we can do. And that's probably an interesting way of looking at the challenge that Europe faces. Maybe the key for the success will be to reinforce the co-everything.
Thank you, Mario. Now, it is true that we succeeded within the EU, and it seems so far the discussion and the friction that was a few weeks ago, we all remember the strong words from the South and from the North, the words of Mr. Orchestra, Minister of Finance from the Netherlands, the reply, for some a bit emotional, from our Prime Minister. Now, this is present and it didn't disappear. It's true that the fact that we needed to move on urge our politicians to make a decision, and indeed to bring this package from the Commission to the table, the Next Generation EU, with 700 billion euros and a reinforcement of the EU budget for the upcoming 7 years. Now, that said, and I think the point of this question is, things are calmer, the spirits, because there was a lot of emotion a few weeks ago. And we talked a lot about this in Portugal. And from your point of view, since you work for the European Commission, what's the mood right now from the Commission? How do you analyze the perspective?
I think that you reflected somehow a bit the mood as well in the Commission. So the interactions with the leaders of the member states, the last virtual council, and the next one that will be physical, where we expect that some decisions will be taken, shows that there is in fact an apaisement of the situation. Now, the things are not solved, obviously. You know, the frugals and the various blocks that we have will remain, and let's not forget that the decisions will not just need to be taken at the European Council level, because they have to be ratified at the level of the member states. But in fact, there is a perception that there is a welcoming of the proposal from the Commission. Like always, the devil is on the details, and obviously some of the as much as we will go further, some questions will start emerging, like you know, what is in for my member state or whatever. I mean, what I think that we have to hope is that the vision and the real sense of leadership from the European leaders will prevail into what is more important. If it is, you know, saving the skin, if I may use the image of a particular country, or if we have this notion that only collectively we can survive, and then the recovery and resilient plans that have to be presented by the different member states, they are cornerstones in that one, because they should not just try to address the current problem. They should put us in the way towards the future. And I think that this is the very, very important challenge. And this side by side with a number of other things that will come on the second part of the year, like the further discussions of the Brexit, like very important dossiers like, you know, migration pact and things like this that have to be addressed. I mean, and I will pick up, if you allow me, Henrique, also in your statement. I mean, we could see also that the last summit, EU-China, showed for the, you would not need to be very attentive, actually. The narrative used has been a little bit more a different tone, if I may say. And the tone was clearly to say, look, I think that Europe is not fully happy, is disappointed, if I may say, with the achievements, and therefore this will call for a rebalancing of the partnership, maybe putting more focus on the mutual benefits. And I think that this is also an interesting sign of this geopolitics at a global level. And maybe it's also a sign of the institutions in Europe understanding that they may actually have some more strengths if they come together. We know that during the presidency, the German presidency, there will be follow-ups of these dialogues, and I hope that we continue united around this point.
Thank you, Mario. Picking up on that, Henrique, Mario was saying a few minutes ago that communication is key. And I remember that in one of your webinars, you said that we should all at some point agree, the member states, that this union is useful. And the fact that we have a lack of communication from our leaders within the country in explaining the added value of this union, and I'm clearly thinking about the Netherlands, couldn't this provoke friction within the country and the perception of the EU? And this is clearly linked to the role that the EU wants to play as the future bloc, the reference. If we are not proud with ourselves, if we can't really have a common line, how can we succeed?
Listen, I think that we have to look at the EU. We need to understand that people look at the EU from different perspectives, and I have full respect. I know using the word federalists, it's not something that we no longer use by now. It's outdated, but it's the instruments to think that we have. So I'll use federalism just to think about it. I know it's not the right tool to analyze the EU, but it's the best we have. We haven't come up with other one. And what I usually, and I'm not a federalist, as you can imagine for what I'm going to say, but my message has always been to federalists, has always been that you shouldn't go faster than what people want, or you risk losing the people and you'll have a bigger problem. And I think that's how I start my reply to what you're saying. We need to remember that the EU is an organization of 27 member states, and we wake up and we are members we are nationals of our state. And we don't think about leaving, well, most of us don't think about leaving the country we live in to abandon. But the EU is something that we grow an attachment, but there's always the possibility of leaving. And we've seen that. And we should bear this in mind so we don't increase the risk of that happening, because I'm totally against it. I'm totally pro-European. I'm just not a federalist. What I think we need to have is that the 27 member states need to see how useful, the added value. And for that, we need to be more on the pragmatic side and the useful side for each member state, rather than the buzzwords of solidarity and so on. What it needs to make sense for the Dutch, as for the Portuguese, is that this is important for all of us. There's an added value. We are bigger. If you think about what you were asking before on the world order, no EU power, President Barroso used to say this, no EU power, even Germany, is a big player in the world as a power. All the European countries are all medium or small size countries at a world level. So the EU gives even the bigger member states, gives them a leverage, gives them a size that they otherwise wouldn't have. And for us, the smaller ones, obviously it gives us. Now, we give away some some of our sovereignty, we have to abdicate of a few things, but that's the trade-off that's in here. The problem is that too often there are two political arenas. One is in Brussels, let's call it in Brussels for the purpose of this conversation, where the 27 member states engage through Parliament, through Council, and in the Commission. And then there are 27 national audiences where the debate is made. I think you lost me.
No, it's good.
António, are you following me still?
Yes, okay.
Because there was a break. Okay. And I'm saying is, and then there are 27 national audiences, and too often national politicians are talking to their national audience, but they're heard in the other 26 member states. And that's what happened, I think, with the Dutch minister and with the Portuguese prime minister. And nothing good came out of that, to be honest. I think nothing good came out of both comments. Even there are reasons for both of them, but nothing good came out of those comments. What we need to understand is it good for us? Is it good for the Dutch to be in the EU and in somehow pay part of the money that we get? Yes. But should we be, Portugal and southern member states, only be talking about the money? No, we shouldn't. There has to be more to it. Otherwise, it does look like a transfer union where you have the rich on the north paying to the poor on the south. That's not what it's meant to be. So we need to present this in another manner. There's more to it than the money transfer.
Sure.
And I think that's how you need to reply. There has to be an added value.
Jaime, picking on what Henrique just said, we have more Europe right now. We are living an interesting moment because the Commission start borrowing money. So for those who are against the federal state, well, somehow we move forward. So this is very interesting that every time we are in a crisis, we move forward, and forward it means more Europe. And this was a huge step. How do you see this, the new role of the Commission of borrowing money?
Well, I think that, as you know, Jürgen Habermas, that is a German philosopher, and it's well known for all the people that understand the Europe story. He spoke lots of times about the European Union agenda and this idea of having European federalism, things like that. I think now, in which concerns the question of the budget, I think the most relevant agenda is trying to establish what I should say intelligence commitment between the countries. The speech in the past was between competition and cohesion. And in fact, we have the countries that are more competent and of course don't need so much money. And you have countries that are not so developed and needs more money. In Portugal has been one of them in the past and even in the present. But I think that mostly what it will be important now, it will be to try to have a common agenda. I have been participating since the last 19 days, every day, in a very interesting agenda that is a meeting, and Mário Campolargo knows that because we have some common friends there. It's a clusters, European clusters meetings every day. Clusters are associations that represent most of the industries that we have in our countries. And it's very interesting to feel what it's the agenda of the companies, of the universities about this. We must be more and more competent. And I think that the actors, the social and economic actors, really feel more and more competent on that. I think that if you agree, António, we have here Alberto Pezzi, that is from Catalonia. That is a very interesting region with a lot of history in terms of competitiveness. I'd like also to listen to Maria Graça Carvalho, that is a very well-known European
I'm giving now the floor to Alberto Pezzi.
I think it should be interesting to open the discussion. Okay.
Alberto, can you hear us?
It's not there.
I believe he's not there.
António,
Okay.
while eventually Alberto comes to the floor.
I think you want to react on that, the previous points.
Okay.
Henrique, in the meantime, maybe you can comment what we just were talking about the moving forward to a federal state, since we're talking about federalists.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. While we wait, I wanted to comment on something that Mário said, which I think where I think you're right. Again, Europe tends to evolve out of need rather than, well, it starts in a big idea, but then the pragmatic side causes to evolve. And I think there's something I learned when I moved from Portugal to Brussels and from the national political ground to the European political ground, is when at the national level, politics is about competition and conflict. Okay, it's government and opposition. When you move to the EU, it's about compromise. Not even in a wedding you hear so often the word compromise. Okay, it's 27 weddings times 3 because there are 3 institutions, and the thing is, that's the only way it works. So you give a little bit, you get a little bit back, and that's what this is all about. It was pretty obvious when this crisis started that everybody was screaming for the EU, and actually unfairly people started saying the EU is not working, whereas actually it was the national governments that didn't work and didn't cooperate. And actually they're doing it all over again, because when it comes to opening the borders, governments are committing the exact same mistakes they did before on closing the borders. They're repeating the same mistakes of lack of coordination, lack of cooperation with the Commission. Now, but this is about mutual benefits and compromise. And Mário was mentioning something, that's where I wanted to go, which I don't know if we'll have to call it federalism or not, but again, moving towards stronger cooperation at the economic level, namely through the European semester, is a major change. I mean, the European semester was already there from the previous crisis, and it was designed to bring the economies closer. But obviously, this was a small step. Okay, there was some coordination. The Commission had some ideas to put on the recommendations. Then, so not to offend some member states, that only put 3 recommendations per country, and all get 3 recommendations, although we know that some need 16 and some other would do well with 1 or 2 recommendations. But okay, that's compromise. But now I think that one of the ways to get the frugals and the not so frugals, but the paying side, if you want, on board will mean that you will have to use the European semester even more. And there's another topic, and I think that's very important for us now. I'm sorry, I'll bring this to the Portuguese side of the conversation. The money that there's going to be this time is different, because in the 80s and 90s and afterwards, the money was there to give us a jump, to put us, and it didn't do it, but okay, to put us closer to the EU average. This time around, you have priorities defined centrally, in the sense that it's the digital, green, and the resilience, what we're now calling resilience, which is which was reindustrialization up to 3 or 4 months ago, and now it's resilience. It's a little bit different, but it borns out of reindustrialization. And the thing is, we cannot look at these just as money pouring in from Europe to Portugal, and we'll leave out of this. This is an opportunity to adapt and to use this in a smart manner. And again, being provocative, we need to think, if we want to use this money to give the Portuguese some money so they can buy bicycles and all become green in their locomotion, or do we want to produce bicycles or hydrogen and stuff like that? So my point here is, there's going to be money to change the economy. And I think that raises 2 issues. One, this one that I was raising, how will we use it? The second issue, which I think is also hasn't been mentioned, but I think we should look at it. It's not very often that a major economic change is brought about from the center and from the state. And I'll try to explain what I'm saying, because I'm not saying that we're watching a planified economy, but because we see the need for a green change, a green transition, and we see the need for a digital transition, we're putting money for that transition. So it's not so much the economy, the industry saying we need money or we want to do this. This is starting out from the center, from the state. And I'm calling state the EU now for the purpose. And I think there's a good explanation, reason why this is happening. We all understand why this is happening. But this is not the same thing as the Industrial Revolution, okay? It's not starting out in the economy, and that's where I think this links to my previous point about how will Portugal, for instance, and other member states will benefit from this. Eventually, this is a need that some industry or the industry in some member states could feel because they are sufficiently developed, but I'm not so sure that that is the case for other countries such as ours. So how do we take advantage of this situation, and how do we not lose the strength of the markets when we have an economic transformation that is being, if not pushed, at least pulled from the center?
Antonio, I don't know if you allow me a comment, because I found very interesting what Henrique said, and I will look more from the implications that I see in the institutional part of Europe, rather than also that is very important. And I completely support your statement about the European semester. It started at a certain moment in time, first steps. Now it has a fantastic opportunity, because with the reform and the resilience plans, that's it. That's, you should not just be on the receiving side, but is a bit also on the guiding side. And that's where probably this will represent a step that a few months ago we would not even think that would happen. But let me make just one comment. And as you know, I've been always linked to the digital side. But what I find interesting on the digital, on the green, and on the resilience is actually that they are not sectorial policies. They are not just saying, okay, we do a package now on the European currency or on the banks, on this. No, they are actually completely transversal. And if Europe would succeed, and this is obviously, I'm not doubting, but I'm just putting it academically as a question. If Europe succeeds in really taking those three leading, then we come to the point that you said. We are not just reactive, we are probably in the first time where we react, but with a sense of proactiveness. And if we are then successful in bringing this together, then we can lead in some particular aspects. But we need to go to the research domain and say, look, those are the priorities. What, as you would say already, Henrique, you know that the missions that were conceived before that already pointed a bit. And I give you just a personal experience. I came a long time to the Commission. I was a young researcher, and I was so happy because you could always find something where to work, with your ideas, And when I came again, was the fifth generation computers in Japan, was all this kind of action, reaction, all that. But we could do a lot of research, and progressively we understand that we do research in the policies that matter for Europe. And therefore we have to do the green, we have to do the digital, and we have to link the digital with the resilience in the perspective of what you said about reindustrialization. And if we succeed to put this together, then we do a change.
Mario, thank you very much. Investing for the next EU generation is the talk. You talk about digitalization, the fact that we need to be proactive, and we are being proactive. But now, in this framework where we have three presidencies, just recently the ministers of foreign affairs from Germany, Slovenia, and Portugal met and tried to coordinate the work. With everything that is happening and issues that we are not tackling because we have too many things to do, migration, Brexit, how do you see the coordination of the different presidencies in order to move forward with our plan?
Antonio, this is really a $1 million question, because all what we may be thinking right now may change from one day to the other with the second wave of pandemics or whatever. But I think that we have to, when we look to the presidency, there is dossiers that come and have a certain continuum and need to be addressed. And it's very interesting that sometimes, presidencies like Germany or others that are extremely important for Portugal, for Europe, they may face themselves in the leading role on dossiers that they may have not been pushing very much as a country in the past. So, but this continuity, and then there is what is the flagships and the initiatives that need to be put forward. And that's where I think that in most of the presidencies we really capture what is the essence of the step that we want to do. Now, I know in practice, especially in my area, that I would like, from the point of view of the public administrations, to get them much more digital. And I believe that this is really fundamental. We invest in Europe a lot on innovation, but when we talk about innovation, we always think about small and medium enterprises, the innovation ecosystem, and we never think about the public administrations. And without public administrations, and again, I don't want, and I don't need actually to make any statements about the level of engagement of the state, how much big or small, how much perception we have from the state. But we could see that during the pandemics, it's very important that we have a machine that is operationally effective. And what is to be operationally effective today is to be digital, because being digital is centered in the citizen, is fast, is reacting. So from my point of view, and the dossiers that I'm responsible for in the Commission, I really look forward for Germany and Portugal to move this digital perspective very fast. And I'm so glad that the two of the Secretary of State of Germany and Portugal will actually meet with me very, very soon, because I see that they are young Secretaries of State. They have a lot of ideas, and this continuum is absolutely important. So I want, and I hope that I can contribute to at least one or two of these steps that these presidencies can give beyond the normal follow-up of the dossiers. And I think that if in my domain, at least the digital part for the public administration will be one of those steps, I'll be super happy.
Excellent. I just would like to appeal to the attendees to, if they would like to raise any question, they can use the chat to do so. We have now a question that I would like to ask you, to all of you, and it's because you are all Portuguese, and the Portuguese presidency is arriving. What are the expectations? What do you think the flag of the Portuguese presidency will be? Jaime.
Well, I think this will be a very good opportunity for Portugal to try to promote what I can call that should be an intelligent agenda for the future. Well, we have been doing a lot of work in terms of innovation, competitiveness, and other areas. I think that now we have lots of examples of success. We have also the example of the tourism, though, of course, with this COVID, things are not so good. But I think that we must promote in a better way what we are doing. So I think that this is the Portuguese presence. We have already some presence in the past, as you know, and they were what I think very good opportunities to reinforce the goodness for the country to belong to Europe. Now that we belong to Europe, we have to promote our identity and our capacity building. And I think it will be a very good experience. So I think that it should be a good experience in terms of promoting what we are going to invest in terms of innovation. And Mário, that is working for a long time with digital areas in the European Commission, knows that. We have been doing for 20 years a very good work in terms of digital innovation. And I think it should be very interesting that Portugal could be what I could call a living lab for promoting with other countries what we are doing in terms of our experience. This is my feeling from what I think it should be this presence next year. Of course, we have the COVID also in terms of our context, but we should try to fight against it.
Henrique, I ask you the same question to you, but adding one point. We say a lot in Portugal that every time we have a presidency, internally it can be a disaster, in the sense that our governments are very focused on the European affairs. They have tons of things to do. So the same question for you: expectations, and what do you think our government will resist to the pressure?
I hope so. And I'm one of those that thinks that the rotative presidencies are really important. Again, this sense of belonging, even if it's only every 14 years or so, nevertheless, I think it's really relevant and we shouldn't give away that. One. Second, previous comments, a comment before answering to that. I was looking to Mário and I was really impressed that we're all talking about adapting and the public administration adapting to all this pressure. And I know it's been 3 months or 4 months almost since the pandemic started, but you look really nice given the fact that you had to manage the digital part of the commission and all this, the way they're working and so on. So whatever it works with you, you should tell the national administrations as well, because you look like you've done your job and your things are going well. Now, let me make a comment. I don't know if you read, the Portuguese Minister of Foreign Affairs, in an interview to Público a few weeks ago, said that the German contribution, German presidency, the German added value would be the economy, and the Portuguese one would be the social part. And to be honest, I can see where this comes from, and I understand the good part of it, but I must say that I would be very much disappointed if that was our added value. And that's for two reasons. One is, I fear that if that is the case, we will be perceived as the presidency of the poor side of Europe. So first come the Germans, the rich, they take care about the economy, then we come in, we take care about the poor. And I understand where this comes from, and I think it comes from two reasons. One, it's naturally and absolutely legitimate, which is ideological in the sense that we have a socialist government, so it makes all the sense to bring in the socialist perspective. That makes all the sense. But my objection to this is that more than 35 years after joining the EU, we need to show that we have more than that. So I really would like to see a presidency that tells a story about, okay, not the biggest companies in Europe, eventually they're not Portuguese, but the medium and small size companies, they're here as they are in other small member states. About the jump that we need to give, the technological jump that we need to give, the concern that the trend for EU champions may raise an issue for the diversity and the different size, smaller and medium sized economies. So I really hope that, although I understand what the minister was saying, I hope that it's more than that. And thirdly, answering to the question, will it work? I think we've excelled in the past, in the sense that for several reasons, and this is one again, our presidencies have been challenged more than the expectations. Remember the Lisbon Treaty? We weren't expecting that problem to come on our watch, and the same here. I mean, our presidency was looking different before all this started. There's a lot of things that are going to move to our presidency. Hopefully, the EU-Africa Summit will be one of those. I hope so. And I really think that our presidency should be the restart, given that the German presidency will be shaping the future, because it will be about the negotiations starting all these projects. But from January on, we will start the relation with the UK, the future relationship with the UK. That will be on our watch. And we will be with a new MFF and eventually, and I hope so, the next generation EU. So I hope it's more than solidarity. I understand that, but I really hope that it's more than that. I think we can do it.
Thank you. Mário, will it be more than solidarity?
I hope so. I hope so. Although I must say that I believe that when we put this economy versus social, it's not a purely a something important, something non-important, because the social gets the context where economy should happen, and you know, I'm maybe with the age I respect more and more to understand the context of the things. Henrique, you just said it. Germany has to deliver the MFF. You know, that will be very fundamental. Okay, we'll have to deliver the first implementations. let alone, as you said, the Brexit. And I'm also very glad to refer that our European Union ambassador in London is actually a Portuguese as well, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's right.
But there are other things that maybe if they don't appear as explicit in the newspapers, I think that have a particular importance. Mercosur. We are just now in the beginnings of implementation. We have a strong relation, so we can give a push. You know, traditionally, we always look to Latin America and to Africa. So you know, I know that those are classic aspects that we bring, but they're very, very important. They may be very opportune to do it. Now, Henrique, I would favor all the support to the innovation, SMEs, you know, the tissue of Europe, I mean. But I'd like just to bring one thing that I think is also important and where Portugal can play an important role is on the Conference of the Future of Europe. Because in fact, this is something that the president launched from the very beginning. And if we want to renew the links between citizens and institutions, and I come back to my initial statements about how the institutions can renew themselves, that is very fundamental. Now you tell me, but that doesn't depend very much on the press. It doesn't matter. I mean, if it is, because it's going to happen more or less at that time, maybe also an opportunity for the presidency and for Europe to renew the link with the citizens in the way that they don't look at the European Union as a pure economicist give and take, but as a sense of belonging that will bring value added to all of us.
Thank you very much. We reached the end of our topics. I don't know if you would like to add something else, Jaime?
António, there are two questions from participants.
Yes.
Oh,
I think yes.
I see a comment indeed from Rui Dias. I don't know if you see.
No, it's on the Q&A. It's from Fernando Monteiro.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Indeed. Priority to green and digital.
Maybe Mario can answer that, I think, or Henrique.
Well, we need to fix the present. Well, it's a very generic statement, and I don't know how to interpret it. I suppose that when you say fix the present, Fernando, is not the present on green and digital only, but the set of problems that we are facing globally. Yeah, I think that the dichotomy between urgent things and important things has to be very clear in our mind. You know, there are things that we need to address because they are urgent, because we cannot live without addressing them. There are things that are important. I think that green and digital are really important. Then the second part of your question, in some sense, is very much related to what I mentioned in terms of the Conference for the Future of Europe. The debate could take us very far. What are the European values? What is the granularity that we attach to the values? What is, you know, in football, if we are all in one stadium, you find 50,000 people that say, "You are from this team, I am." As soon as you start going down on different values, he start dividing this, you know. So what is this notion? What level we want the values? I mean, but I think that values like in the digital, data protection, security, the respect for the other, the non-hate speech, the fake news, all of those are emanations within the digital of important values that we have. The dominance of the big companies when we talk about social networks, the abuse or the use of artificial intelligence in such a way that, you know, you bias the society. All of those are very anchored on our very European principles. But it would be a very interesting discussion. Maybe I challenge António to do another webinar just on the values that we want to preserve.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We are
António,
really.
I'd like to make yes.
Jaime,
Yes, a final comment. Well, it was very interesting this webinar. Thank you very much for Mario and Henrique for their disponibility to be here. It was supposed to do that in Brussels, but of course, because of the pandemic, it was not possible. But I think it was a very interesting discussion. We had people from Brussels, people from Portugal. Well, I think that we are living a very complex and uncertain day, a VUCA day, as we started saying, but we must be very positive. And I think that what we have to do and I try to be on the eyes of Mário. Mário is a Portuguese person that lives a long time in Brussels, but never forgets our country. And every time he comes to here, to Aveiro, to Oporto, trying to remember its roots. Henrique is also a Portuguese that lives and works for a long time in Brussels, but always present in Portugal. And I think this is a good example. We need people that don't forget their roots, don't forget the country, and have at the same time a global overview. And it is the kind of people that we are going to need in the future, people that can make this commitment between the local and the global, because the COVID will be fought with this kind of agenda. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I think we'll have another opportunity in the future to speak about this challenge.
Thank you very much, everybody. See you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.